African Americans were interested in inventing all sorts of things. And like so many products, it's almost hard to say who invented the product that we use today. So for example, the inventor that I've studied in most detail, a guy named Walter Magers, who was from Springfield, ultimately went to St. Louis, he invented things for taxi cabs, heaters, African-American hair products, blow dryer, I mean just all sorts of things. Now, or to say he got patents for all of those things, but to say that he invented a taxi cab meter would not really be completely accurate, right? He invented one kind of taxi cab meter. Black inventors instilled a lot of pride for African Americans because they demonstrated the mastery of technology, which was very important in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when one of the stereotypes about African Americans was they were backward, rural, and not very smart. But if you could invent something and get a patent for something, even if it wasn't used, it conferred status on you. And so that was really important. Probably the person who's most known for being an inventor, which is again is not fully accurate, is George Washington Carver from Diamond, Neosho, Missouri. Now, again, he really probably wasn't what we consider of as an inventor. What he was really was a master at giving applications. And so he would find hundreds of uses for peanuts, tomatoes, and all sorts of ways of growing things. And he maybe didn't always invent the process, but what he did is he was able to explain it and apply it so ordinary African American farmers and other poor farmers could have cash crops, make money. But it gets all to this rhetoric around, oh, if African Americans could invent something and they could master science, this would benefit the race. And so this is what this was really about. And I also think one of the other things that my research into black inventors showed was that being a black inventor was a way of being political that was acceptable to the black middle class, it was accepted to white middle class, and it didn't seem like people were asking for voting rights, education rights, and social equality. And so being a black inventor really became sort of a special status. Well, I think it's really essential for people to think about African Americans as inventors and in business people, because so many of the stereotypes which have been handed down for generations have criticized African Americans in terms of intelligence, criticized African Americans in terms of work ethic. But the role of the African American inventor is it just upsets all of those things. Because if we can have African Americans who were inventors and did patents and created businesses based on sort of new ideas, all of a sudden this idea that African Americans weren't equal to whites in terms of intelligence just gets exploded. And it also shows, I think, another way in which people can protest. Well, protesting on the streets is great. Getting new legislation, we need that. But there's also ways where if you are sitting in your garage tinkering with things and inventing things, it is a way in which you're challenging the status quo. Here in town, as I've talked about, Walter Magers, I think was a really important figure within the African American community, and part of the reason why I started studying him was that his name just constantly would appear. She started out actually working in a business that catered black beauty products. That's why you've got the comb, the hair dryer, and things like that, products that were exclusively aimed at the black consumer. And actually a lot of early inventions and a lot of early wealthy African Americans, they worked on products like that. So Annie Turnbull Malone, who was from St. Louis, and she was doing black beauty products. And Walter Magers actually worked for her and learned a lot of his business acumen through there. The other thing about the Walter Magers story is that he owned a garage. At first, this sort of confused me, like, well, gosh, here was this guy who was an inventor. He was very ambitious. Why was he owning a garage? Well, a garage was a great cover for doing a lot of invention. He lived in a part of St. Louis, which was dominated by African Americans, and he made his business, it looks like, by fixing, repairing taxi cabs, which again makes a lot of sense. But it also meant that he was constantly trying to figure out how do we make more money out of a taxi cab? How do we make them more efficient? How do we make them more effective? And so he was kind of a handyman in St. Louis, and that's why he kind of did all of these different kinds of products, because people would come to him and say, I've got this problem. This isn't working. How do I fix it? There are people, primarily in the Smithsonian and some other places, who have created lists of black inventors. The interesting part about this is that those lists, though, are partial and incomplete. And so, for example, Walter Majors, the guy who I've spent the most time studying, he's not on any of those lists, or he wasn't when I was studying him, because even though he had about a dozen patents, he never put in any of his patents that he was black. And the people who were compiling those lists, when they compiled those lists, they just were including people who listed that they were African Americans. So he's someone who's been overlooked and missed. And so there probably are lots of black inventors who have been overlooked and missed. And then the other thing that's the other problem with those lists is that in order to get a patent then and today, you need quite a bit of money. And just getting a patent doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make a lot of money. So what happened was a lot of people who invented things just tried to make money selling them locally. So, I mean, an example of this would actually be the Hardwick grocery store. They never got a patent for what they were doing, but why Hardwick grocery store was so successful in Springfield was it had really developed a pretty innovative way to get products from farms in the region and use cars and trucks to deliver them, which today you're like, that's a no-brainer. But they really invented, at least for the Springfield area, how one would go farther to get your products and then sell them that way. Now, it's an invention, right? Nobody had done it. They used an existing technology to do something that people hadn't done, and it gave them a fairly significant advantage, which today that's something that you could patent that process. But Hardwick didn't go through that, right? He just said, I'm really in the grocery store business. I came up with this new method. And at that point, an African-American entrepreneur probably wasn't going to be terribly successful if he would not have made a lot of money from it and going through all that expense. And so he invented something and never made it into the patent record. The status quo is not natural, right? And so a lot of times people will assume whatever we see in our world, that's just the way it is. But when it gets to why we have such a small percentage of people, of African Americans who are getting patents and owning businesses, it's because of education, it's because of our prison system, it's because of how banks lend money and don't lend money. There's so many things that need to be changed. And I think at this moment when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, which is focused a little bit more on police issues right now, the issues why African Americans have struggled in America over the last 400 years is there's all these structural constraints. And I think when you look at the Black Inventor shows you it's not just the constraints which are maybe more obvious, but there's all these constraints that have to do with education, that have to do with how finance works, with how business works, which means that everyone isn't getting an equal shot to succeed, that certain people seem to get legs up. And that's something that I think the Black Inventor can help us see.